Welcome to the Voice of Women podcast with the purpose to empower women and disrupt the gender gap. I am your host, Priya Kandula. Do you know that feeling which we get when we follow our passion when it comes to our career goals? Welcome to another episode on the podcast Breaking the Glass Ceiling. I am Priya Kandula, your host and CEO of Codeforce 360. And I'm so excited to bring to you a guest boasting a rich and diverse career spanning 2 decades in the procurement and sourcing industry, Keona R. Williams. She is a certified diversity practitioner, an esteemed diversity champion, and senior category manager. Kiona is committed to promoting inclusivity and equity in her professional endeavors. And beyond her corporate commitments, she is also an esteemed member of the historically Black Greek lettered sorority Zeta Phi Beta Incorporated, where she has led numerous community driven initiatives focusing on social activities. So, without further ado, I would love to welcome Keona R. Williams. Kiona, welcome. Thank you so much. It's a privilege and honor to be really interviewing you. Thank you so much for taking the time from a busy schedule. And I'm so excited to be discussing the topic, the resilience women forge in a male-dominated workplace. I know this topic is very close to your heart. It is close to mine too. So when you hear this sentence, what is your initial thoughts that come to your mind?
So I love this topic. The initial thought that comes to mind is bias. Navigating ourselves in a male-dominant world is difficult, and we as women have to reinvent ourselves to work within those biases for the systems that were created before we entered the room.
I love that. And how do you think that we can overcome these biases which exist in a workplace?
I think there are probably 4 areas that I would lend to this to navigating ourselves. And the first one would be establishing ourselves as a source of trust, demonstrating our emotional intelligence, continuing our path in education and professional development, and finally asking for the promotion, for participation, for the increase, asked to be a part of those special projects and asked to be present in the room while decisions are happening. I think those are the best ways for us to manage ourselves within those and within the space of, I don't want to say misogyny, but that's exactly what it is in a male dominant workspace.
I love what you said. I think first is, building trust. I echo that. Emotional intelligence, I do feel that, we have to show it a lot more because I feel that on an average, I think women do have more emotional, EQ than men. And then I think the last thing what you said is to ask. I think that is so important. Where I know there have been a lot of research done where they say that we don't tend to ask even if we know we are 100% fit for that role, for that job, for that project. I think just having people push us a little bit and say just ask. If it's a no, it's a no, right? I think that is so important. Yeah. And do you think that is one of the reasons why there are not too many women executives present in these male-dominated workplaces?
So I do think that it's because we don't ask. I also think that it's largely because executive presence, the rules around executive presence were created before women entered the workforce, and they were never amended to include us. And so asking for our presence is definitely necessary if we're looking for upward mobility and growth in our field. I think that asking is the least we could do.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think we can work towards, I know Rome was not built in a day, this is not going to happen overnight, but how do you think that we women can, start to, go ahead and say that, so there was a very interesting research done where, they said there's a lot more women in the mid-management range, but, when we go to the C-suite, there's not too many of us. Right, they're all being promoted till there, and then that's where we're hitting the glass ceiling, if I may say. So what do you think, like little steps that we can take, and how do we ask to say that, hey, seat me at that table, I can bring more to you guys than just me sitting at this level?
I think it goes back to demonstrating ourselves as a trusted source, right? If we are confident in our approach and our technique, and we're confident in our craft, we've developed ourselves. Asking and being present is the normal trajectory to break that glass ceiling. We won't break it unless we do the work, and doing the work starts internally. Quieting the imposter syndrome, quieting all of the things that we heard, the naysayers. I think that us advocating for our seat at the table is key.
Right. And one other really important question that I always like to think is, as women, we can be feminists, we can really voice our opinions, we can ask, but how do we change the mindsets of the people who are actually the decision makers, right?
That is a very good question. And when you figure that answer out, you will have figured out the master mystery. Changing the mind requires us to be engaged in building a relationship first. We have to establish the relationship with the decision makers and become that confidant and become that shoulder to lean. But so often we miss that part on our way up. We're so busy in the books, we're so busy trying to nail processes, technique, that we forget that the relationship is needful, even to be in the room for your name to be present when you're not. So I think that, when you have established a relationship, people are comfortable using their social capital to recommend you as a woman in the field, as a leader in the field. And I think that it will go a long way with your professional development, is allowing yourself to make time to build the important relationships.
I love what you said. I think it's also so important for us to be okay to be seen, to be okay to take compliments, right? And then say that, hey, I did a great job. What is it that I did not do that the other person, who's handling the project did not do? I think it's so important to ask the right questions. I love what Tony Robbins always says. Questions are so powerful. When you ask the right questions, we're getting the right answers. I think it's also us learning, to ask the right questions in the right way is so important. Thank you for sharing all of that. So I'm going to go back to women in the executive presence, right? How do you think that we can increase our presence? I know you said we have to ask, but how do you think we can have those women champions saying this person also deserves it? Right. So how do you think we can go have that conversations with our champions who are
so I think that we should start small, right? You start with your peers. You start building the relationships with your peers. And once you've mastered your peer-to-peer relationships, then you start going to the next level. You start building slowly those relationships so that now you've left an impact on an entire organization, right? You started with the peers, then you've moved to middle management, then you've moved to senior management. Now start building those relationships. They really, really matter. Offer your help when no one else is volunteering. Don't be afraid to step up. Don't be afraid to fail. I think that those are some of the key requirements for building internal peace with executive presence, since it wasn't designed for us. I think that establishing the relationship, however, is key in every area of growth in your professional development.
Yeah. I also want to go back and touch the point where you so beautifully said that we don't have examples of too many women in the C-level suite, right? Like we don't know how they made it there. I feel that, more women should come out and talk about their journeys who are at that level to help people like me, get there as well. So what do you feel about how do we go about, sharing that message a lot more, and, how do we make it available to more women so that, for me, I always say this, there's, when we see people do it, our brain thinks that, yes, we can do it too. So I think it's getting that message out there of all the women who made it and how they made it, the struggles that they face, to talk about the struggles, not make it look like I'm just talented so I am here, versus I struggle so I am here, and these are the struggles and this is how I overcame. Where do you think women like me can go get those messages to hear and imbibe into my journey as well?
So first, I think it's always important to have women leaders, right? Women who may not necessarily have made it to the C-suite, but are leading or owning their presence wherever they are. And so, build, start with a mentor. That's number one. Start with a mentor. If you struggle in particular areas, maybe you don't like talking in front of people, start with a mentor so that that mentor can guide you. And then when you're comfortable with your mentor, you want to move to a sponsor. And that looks different from the mentor relationship. And one of the persons that I've recently started following, who I've grown to absolutely love, is Carla Harris. She has books to give you the tools that you need. They're not the standard professional development where it's a bunch of interventions that are off kilter, that may miss the mark or doesn't quite fit with the role you're in. But what she does is she chronicalizes and she displays tenets of ideas that we should follow. And if you follow her book, right, you write down the steps and you follow them, then that is your roadmap to upward mobility. And I love how she's laid it out.
I love that. I'm going to go look her up and see, buy some books. So thank you so much for sharing that as well. Um, I also want to ask you, what is it, that one tool that, if you have to give to women and say that, this is one tool in my 20 years of career really helped me forge forward and build resilience. You can give us more than one, we're more than happy, but, if this is one tool, which really helped you, get from here to there, what would that be?
Prioritizing self-care.
I
We
love that.
take on so much. We have to prioritize our self-care, prioritizing your mental agility, right? You need to decompress, you need to relax for a minute, and remove yourself so that you can gander fresh ideas. You can, really sit down and think about your next step. Sometimes we're moving so quickly that we forget that one key step, and rest is definitely essential to our growth.
Yes. And when you bring about the word self-care, a lot of them think self-care is selfish, one thing. And the second thing is I don't have time for it, is what they say. And the third thing is they just think self-care is about getting your nails done, or being able to get your hair done and things like that. So there's that misconception out there when it comes to self-care. Each one has their own definition, but what do you think is your definition for self-care, which helps you build resilience?
My self-care is um, my way to step away from the professional world and just feed my mental agility. And what I mean by that is I like to read. And so I may step away from work at 4 o'clock and spend the rest of the evening reading or listening to an audiobook. Somehow I am developing myself in my time. I may journal and write down my plans. I may decide this is the day that I'm preparing for the week, and execute my time management strategy. So I think that however you spend your self-care, it does need to be productive for yourself. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lounge out. Now,
Mhm.
that's a part of it,
Right.
but it's not the whole piece.
Yeah.
You have to continuously eat. And so you have to always feed yourself to make sure that you have the energy to move. And your professional development is the same way. Your self-care is the same way. What are you doing in your self-care? It's resonated in your workload. It's resonated in your everyday operation. So self-care for me is preparing and reading and developing myself.
I love that. I read a lot about self-care too. And that's where I understood that, the definition of self-care is very different for each of us. But if I have to summarize it, self-care is, are you progressing to where you want to be a little every day? And it's ebb and flow. It's not going to be a linear graph, but are we progressing or not is, what I always feel. And that's what helps you build your resilience. I want to speak a little bit about resilience too here, because I think there's a lot of misconception about resilience where people think it is linear, like, your graph is just going, linearly increasing. But I just want to talk about resilience where, resilience is something where, you come back to your normal state in spite of, the things happening around you. Like you come back to your happy medium, if I may say. And that's where, we have to build resilience. And how long is it taking for you to come back to your happy medium? Like, let's say, you didn't get that promotion which you were supposed to get, it was given to somebody not as deserving as you. Are you holding it on for a year, or are you coming back and saying, what can I do here to change something? That's what resilience is. What are your thoughts on this?
I would have to agree. Resilience is being able to recover quickly so that you can move forward. And the only way to recover quickly is to be abreast of your own emotions, right? And expecting failures. Most people have a hard time recovering from their failures, but your failures are propellers. They're going to push you in the right direction if you allow them to. So, okay, this method didn't work. What is the next approach? And if you are always moving with the next approach in mind, right, then you have an opportunity to say, oh, I prepared for that, right? So if you've prepared for your failures, then resilience is the benefit of being prepared for those failures.
I love that. I love what you just said. And to all our viewers, I just want to ask you if there is one book that you can recommend for somebody to take away after watching this podcast, what would it be?
It would be Lead to Win by Carla Harris.
Lead to Win.
Lead to Win.
Definitely buying that immediately after I hang up this call. So thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, just all the nuggets that you have shared, I think, one is, to ask. I think that is so important. You put it so well. And I think the second thing you just said is just preparing to fail. When you're prepared to fail, our resilience increases. I think those two are such good nuggets, and just self-care, always self-care. Thank you so much for sharing that wealth of information with us. Really, really grateful, for taking the time to be here and share that knowledge of yours. I'm definitely buying that book immediately, and I'm going to just share whatever I read from there, and use it in my own life as well. So thank you so much, Kiona. Any last words that, you want to say before, we end the call?
I just want to thank you for your time today. This was amazing. I appreciate being here present with you. And I am an advocate for all women in all spaces. And so if I could leave with one thing, it's just persist. Persist.
Love that. Love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kiona. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
I am truly grateful to you for taking the time to listen, learn, and share today. Please do share it with your friends and family if you got any value from it. Stay tuned for more stories, insights, and tools to empower each other. Let's break the glass ceiling together.